Welcome to Real Estate Real World, where we talk to the movers, shakers, and leaders that are getting it done right now in the real estate industry and beyond. Your host is Marguerite Crespillo, and she started this podcast simply to talk to cool people about what's really happening in this crazy roller coaster ride of real estate. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and stay up to date on the newest stuff by adding yourself to the list at www.realestaterealworld.com. Now your host, Marguerite Crespillo.
Hello, everybody. I'm Marguerite Crespillo, and welcome to another wonderful edition of Real Estate Real World. And today we have a very special guest, of course. We have Mr. Jay Thompson, who is with Zillow. So I'm going to read his little bio here. Formerly the co-owner of Thompson's Realty, an independent brokerage in the Phoenix, Arizona area. Wow, you moved from Phoenix to Seattle. Different weather, huh?
That's about as different as you can get.
Jay Thompson joined the Zillow Group in 2012 as a director of industry outreach. Jay acts as a liaison between the agent broker community and Zillow Group, in addition to providing Zillow Group employees insight into the wants and needs of real estate agents and brokers across the country. Welcome.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So I was listening, and now you're going to have to tell me his name, but you had posted the other day on your page podcast with, I think, the CEO of Zillow, where
Yes.
he was talking about the culture and the environment there of Zillow.
Yep.
And so I read the article, which I was really fascinated by, and then I listened to the podcast that he did. And I'm always fascinated a little bit by culture because I think, first of all, you know, as a real estate agent, I've been in real estate 23 years. Many of us have kind of this like little love-hate relationship with Zillow, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like one side or the other. And obviously we're going to talk about where there's room, you know, for both to have an opinion in there. But I loved listening to the fact that what is important to him was that the culture of what you guys are currently working in is really important and taking time to do that.
Yep. Yep. It's super. And our leadership team does a great job of maintaining that culture. Zillow started in 2006, so it's been about 10 years. And back then, that was before I started working here, but it was small. There was 20 people that worked here, and it was very, very much an entrepreneurial, open environment. And the leadership here has done a really good job of trying to maintain that entrepreneurial type spirit as we grew from 20 employees to almost 2,500 now. So
wow, that's a huge jump.
It's a big jump.
So were you the first person hired for, did they create that position that you do for you, or was that a position that had been around? Because I had never really heard of anyone doing that until, you know, you've obviously made a lot of traction.
It was basically created. There was a guy that used to work here named David Gibbons, great guy. He left Zillow before I started working, and he did some of what I do. He did a lot of the community aspect side of it. Now, Dave was not a former agent, so he didn't have that agent broker insight that I had, but he's a super sharp guy. So that was probably the closest thing to what I do now. But
so what made you decide to go from, well, let me ask you this. How long did you have your brokerage?
Brokerage, I got my sales license in 2004. And in Arizona, you have to be licensed for 3 years before you can sit for the broker exam. So I did that right at 3 years. So brokerage opened in 2007, early in 2007. So you're looking at 5 years, roughly, before I started working at Zillow.
Good timing there, huh? You did it right when the market...
Right when the market was, not good, especially in the Phoenix area. The market was, we went through a really big upturn. One of the craziest markets in the country. And then, of course, what goes up must come down.
Of course.
And when it came down pretty hard. But we figured, you know what? If we can survive or start a brokerage and survive and thrive in a down market, then it's all uphill from there. And it worked out well. So
tell us about what your job is at Zillow. What is it that what is your objective? What do you do there?
That's a really good question. Like you said in the introduction, I act as a liaison between the broker agent community and Zillow. And it's a lot of brand monitoring. I scour the interwebs for mentions of Zillow. There's a fair amount of misinformation or misunderstanding about what we do. So I try to set that record straight. It's not an easy thing to do. It's super easy for me to come across as very defensive, and that's really not the intent. My intent is really to educate people. Here's a perfect example. It's a story I use a lot. There was a gentleman who shall remain unnamed that for years had been pretty negative towards Zillow. And he was saying something in a conversation one day that clearly indicated to me that he really didn't understand what it is that we offer agents as far as our advertising products. And so I asked him about it privately. I said, we'll call him John Doe. I said, John, it's pretty clear to me that you don't really understand our ad products. And he said, you're right. I've never spent a dime on Zillow. I don't really understand what it is that you do or what you offer. And so then I'm going, well, okay, how then can you be so negative in making statements about us when you just told me you don't have any idea of what it is that we really do? And we had a great conversation, probably 30, 45 minutes on the phone. And at the end of the conversation, he goes, well, you know what? Now I know a lot more about Zillow, and it's not so evil after all. And he has basically disappeared from the hater side of the internet. So, that's one person. And if I need to educate people one at a time about what we do, then that's what I'll do. Obviously, that's not very scalable and it's not very efficient. But, that's kind of the gist of it. I don't want to defend Zillow as much as I want people to understand exactly what it is that we do.
So I know my own opinions a little bit on this, but why do you think that, and I know you spend a lot of time in the groups. There's a lot of, Facebook groups I see you, and they're frequently answering questions, engaging and interacting, which I think is valuable because, to be honest with you, I was probably similar to that guy. I really had no idea, what was going on and what was happening, and I was seeing a lot of complaints. So it helps with that. But why do you, other than people lack of knowledge, I guess would be the main one, but why do you think there are some of the what are the main complaints, and why do you think those exist?
Great question. I hear a lot of the same things over and over and over. The Zestimate's not accurate. You don't have all the listings. Some of the listings are old. A lot of data integrity type of questions. And then there's the whole, Zillow doesn't even sell leads. There's the very common misperception that we sell leads, and what we sell is impression-based advertising that hopefully winds up being leads and contacts. But we don't have a package where we say we will give you 20 leads a month or 80 leads a month. We sell impressions. So there's just a lot of misunderstanding. I think that's a lot of it. I think inherently Zillow has had, or I should say Zillow Group, because that's what we are now, since before Zillow launched, there was always this concern that some expressed that we were out to replace the real estate agent.
You hear that every other day in the groups, I think.
And I think that was probably born by the fact that the two co-founders, Rich Barton and Lloyd Frank, co-founded Zillow. Prior to that, they co-founded Expedia, the travel site. And we all know what happened to travel agents over time once the internet kind of got a hold of travel. And of course, Expedia was a big part of that. So I think there were a lot of people, or are a lot of people, not a lot necessarily, there are some people that combine those two things. They said, okay, Expedia disintermediated the travel agent. So clearly that's the objective of Zillow, is to disintermediate or eliminate the real estate agent, which really makes absolutely zero sense if you think about it. Our revenue, we have several revenue streams, but our main revenue stream by far is agent advertising. So we sell advertising to real estate agents. It makes no sense that we would want to get rid of real estate agents. I don't know of any business in the history of mankind that's been successful with a strategy of eliminating their customers. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I get the concern and the fear, but I think if people would just stop and think about it, that's really not the plan. We want agents to be wildly successful, and that's somewhat selfish because if an agent is successful with our advertising products, then they tend to buy more advertising products, right? So we do a lot of work to help agents not just get contacts, but then do something with that contact once they get them, i.e., convert them potentially into a client. Because you can have 1 million leads, but if you're not converting any of those leads to customers, then they don't do you any good. Yeah. So we spend a lot of money and effort and resources on developing tools and systems and training and things like that to help our advertising agents be more successful. Some of that, and people won't believe this, some of that is indeed, I think, just out of the goodness of our heart. We want people to be successful, but we're a business, right? We're in business to make money by selling advertising to real estate agents. So again, the more successful they are, then the less likely they are to cancel, the more likely they are to buy more advertising. So it's a win-win-win situation. I think it's a win for consumers, and it's a win for agents, and it's a win for us.
So in my experience in real estate, I've always tried to look at things in a couple different parts to the process, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at any kind of business, there's marketing, operations, and finance. But marketing always comes down to how you bring business in the door, what you do to get that business in the door.
Yep.
And then the next part of that process is what you do to take care of those people so that they will now be repeat and referral clients, that they will refer people and repeat. And the big shift that I'm seeing, in my personal opinion, in the real estate industry is the good and the bad of what online marketing is doing, or paid marketing, or digital, whatever you want to call it, is putting some of that fear into agents of the fact that you may potentially take their business away. The good part about that is, hopefully, if the agents are smart about it, they're going to find ways to consistently improve the process.
Yep.
Right? To make
Yep.
that process better. Because here's the example I give all the time when people always go, oh, Uber or Zillow or somebody's going to come in and take over the real estate deal. Well, I think that there is a big portion of it that someone could take over, because right now the agents aren't doing a good enough job, is what it comes down to. They're not doing an extraordinary job of connecting with people and taking great care of them, so they'll repeat and refer people. So if that's the case, there's always a place for you guys, right? Mm-hmm. And for something like that. But the last 10 feet of it, Dean Jackson says it on one of the podcasts I did with him, and he says you can't digitize the last 10 feet, which the last 10 feet is that really emotional part of the real estate process. Yep. That needs the human touch, that needs that connection.
Absolutely. And I use the same argument as well. People talk, and have been talking for years, that the internet's going to replace real estate agents. And buying or selling a home is way too emotional, like you just said. It's an infrequent process I think the NAR says the average person buys a new home every 7 years. So it's emotional, it's infrequent, it's expensive, it's complicated. And anybody, I sold real estate myself too, and anybody that's sold real estate for more than a few weeks understands that there's a whole lot more to a real estate transaction than filling out a purchase contract, finding a home, and doing that side of the business. We as real estate agents are marriage counselors. We are psychiatrists.
Bartenders, if we're lucky.
There's a website or an app just isn't going to replace that human side of a real estate transaction, which is super important. And when people say, well, your two co-founders, look what they did to travel agents. Well, travel is a completely different thing than real estate, right? I mean, computers are very good at looking at big giant databases and finding the best way to get you from point A to point B at whatever time you need to be there, right? It doesn't take a lot of human. The other day I had an event in Miami that I had to get to, and I knew, okay, I needed to be in Miami on Wednesday afternoon. So all I need to do that is a big giant database of all the flights, and I can go, okay, this flight A will get me to Miami when I need to be there. So I buy the ticket online. That is a totally different thing than trying to buy real estate online. Again, because all the things we were just talking about, the emotion, the infrequency, the expense. I don't need to see a plane ticket before I buy it, right? I pretty much need to see a home before I buy it. And agents do far more than just unlock the door, but it's just too personal an experience. I don't think that technology or the internet or anything else will ever be able to replace that human part of the real estate transaction. How is an app going to talk somebody off the ledge? You know, they've just got their inspection report back. It's the home they love, and the inspector says, you know, you really need a new water heater. Your roof's only got a few years of life left in it. And then your buyer has a meltdown, right? They're like, oh, my dream home is falling apart. There's no way I'm going to be able to hand somebody a phone and say, here, tap on this app and it'll fix all your problems. It's just not going to happen.
No, and where I think the disconnect, I think, with a lot of agents too, is that if they would just stop and take the time and attention to really look at the entire process, and again, use you guys for what you're worth, right? Like use you guys to bring in the business, but then find ways. To me, I think that it's a great way to turn up the volume a little bit on your business and turn it down. Turn it up or turn it down, right?
Yep.
We've done that. Some of us that have been around a long time did that with direct response marketing and a number of other things or different ways to market. But really take the time to improve the process. I mean, some of the stuff that, to me, I've used Zillow to help me. Like, I know most of those estimates are not accurate, and that's a way to make sure that my client understands that so that they will call me and talk to me. So to me, it's kind of a win-win because, like, where I live is a perfect example. I live out in the country on 5 acres, and I live a half mile from a high-end golf community.
Yep.
So my house never comps right on Zillow. It's not gonna, because the closest comps are not comparable to my house, but they're within a half mile.
Yep.
So you can use that information to say, look, that's why you need us who are here locally as a professional to tweak it. But it does give you a range at least and an idea. I wish my house was as worth what it says on Zillow, but
yeah. And what I tell people and what I used to tell my agents when I owned my brokerage was exactly what you said. Use this as an opportunity to demonstrate your expertise, okay? There are certain things that a computer algorithm that's trying to value a house will never be able to do, right? We can't smell the inside of the house.
We wish somebody needs to invent that app.
Smell vision we'd get rich.
A little scary.
But it is. You know, we don't know if the house across the street is painted purple or has a 67 Chevy up on blocks in the driveway. An example I use all the time this was before I was in real estate, my company relocated me from Austin, Texas to Phoenix. So we basically had the kind of deal where we went to Phoenix for a weekend, and we literally had Saturday and Sunday to try to find a house. So we got a great agent through our relocation company, and we found the house that we loved. And I mean, it was one of those things, and you've seen it as an agent yourself too, when people do a lot of times a buyer just walks through the front door and says, this is the one, right? They haven't even seen the rest of the house. But our agent looked at us and he goes, okay, there's something you need to know about this neighborhood. There's a dairy farm about 2 miles down the road. And when the wind blows in a certain direction on cool evenings, it smells like a dairy farm, which is not a very pleasant thing. That is something, to me, that is virtually unfindable on the internet. Yeah, I could have looked at a map and I could have noticed that there's a dairy farm, but when you've got a guy standing in the living room of this vacant house explaining this to you, that kind of neighborhood knowledge and expertise is virtually impossible for a website to capture. So you've got to have that personal expert touch. And if I think that if you use it in the right, let me put it this way. If you are doing your true job as a real estate agent, which should be out there connecting and networking and getting to know people, then
people are going to at least look at Zillow to get a rough estimate, but they're going to call you.
Yep.
Like, they're not going to call somebody random if you have connected with them. If they have somebody that they know, that they trust, that they have confidence in,
Yep.
regardless of what you guys say on Zillow, they're going to call someone like that agent. So in a lot of ways, I think over the last few years, agents have gotten lazy, and I'm one, so I can bitch about them. But the fact is that I remember back in the old days, and we talk like old lady now, when we didn't even have the dang computers, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, we had to know it all. And so our jobs have gotten so easy. So when I talk a little bit about, like I mentioned, the Uber, right now, literally, somebody could drive past a house, call me, say they want to see it, show them the house, go back, write the offer on win forms, email it to them via DocuSign, right? Like, you never even have any conversation or communication with the clients anymore. So to me, it's just a big red flag that says you need to get out there and connect. This is a great resource for people to start, but it can't complete the entire process.
Absolutely. And I think consumers understand that. Because I hear a lot of agents say, well, consumers just assume that your Zestimate is accurate. And my argument is that, first of all, putting the letter Z in front of the word estimate doesn't really change what it means. It's an estimate, right? And there's a reason we call it the Zestimate, not a Zappraisal or a Zaprice, because it's not an appraisal and it's not a list price. But it is a good starting point. I tell people all the time, and I did it as an agent and a broker, if you look at the Zestimate history, because we put a nice little chart down below the listing, ignore the prices on the scale, right? Because I don't want to say I don't care if a home's really worth $250 and the Zestimate says it's worth $220, but look at the trends of that Zestimate over time. And if you do that and you match it up to true sale prices over time, the curves are almost exactly right. So in other words, we may not nail the actual value of the home to the dollar, but we have lots of historical data that'll show, look, this house has gone up and down over time, and that really does pretty well match up. So we may not nail the price, but we nail the trend in the history, which can be valuable information.
I think absolutely. So I want to go back a little bit and understand what's the vision really for Zillow? What is it there? I know you can't talk about future stuff, of course, but there's got to be a vision in place of what you're working towards, right?
Right. I'm going to look it up right now because we have a vision and a what's the word I'm looking for? A goal. I don't want to get it wrong, and I should have it memorized, but I don't. Hang on just a second while I stumble through this and try to find this. I'm basically Googling Zillow mission statement.
Oh, I could have pulled that up.
Right on our About page, for example, it says Zillow is a leading real estate and rental marketplace dedicated to empowering consumers with data, inspiration, and knowledge about the place they call home. We want to develop the marketplace for consumers. And I think that term marketplace can scare or at least get agents concerned. What we mean by marketplace, and right down 2 blocks away from me is Pike Place Market in Seattle, right? It's a big open air, started as a farmer's market, but now there's all kinds of other stuff there. So that is a marketplace, meaning there are vendors there selling their wares, and people come and make those connections. And that's really basically what we want to do is the marketplace is we want a spot where consumers can get lots and lots of information, where they can connect with professionals, real estate professionals, and it's that connection that's our goal is to empower consumers with data, yes, but we also want to connect them to real estate professionals that can help them interpret and understand that data, right? Because there's mountains and mountains and reams of data out there. The internet has opened up data to everybody.
It's crazy.
But it is crazy. Somebody needs to interpret that data for all these consumers. Again, remember, consumers buy a home roughly every 7 years. They're not into it every single day like real estate agents are. So if we can create a marketplace or a place where consumers and agents can connect and start to work together, then that's what we want to do.
So I want to ask a question a little bit about reviews. Like I did do some advertising for my team last year on Zillow. And one of the issues that came up when I was reviewing my profile, and overall my profile looks pretty good. I got 400 or 500 sales that show up on there and 23 years in real estate. But I didn't have that many reviews because I hadn't really made a concerted effort to go out and push for reviews. And so in reviewing it up against another agent in my market area, there was an agent who had only been in the business a couple years but had tons and tons of reviews. And so I guess I wanted to have a little conversation about that and how the reviews work on there. Mm-hmm. Because it appears that in talking to my rep, the number one thing that consumers appear to look at is reviews, or how do the reviews affect the business, the leads or the impressions or whatever it is that might come your way?
Great question. If you look at a listing on Zillow, there will be 3 or 4 agents in the top right-hand corner of the listing, right? It gets, I don't know that we need to spend a bunch of time explaining why there's 3 or 4. Basically, there will be 3 paid advertisers in that box, and if the listing agent is not a paid advertiser, they're put into the same box, right, at the top of the list. So what that box displays is it displays a little thumbnail photo with your name, phone number, and then it'll have the number of reviews that you have right there in that. So it's just a little tiny box that's got some basic information. So if you put your consumer hat on and think like a consumer and say, okay, I'm looking at this listing and I'm presented with these 3 agents A, B, and C, right? And just it's a very quick visual glance. You can go, oh, agent A has 45 reviews, agent B has 13 reviews, and agent C has 2 reviews. I think human nature and the way humans interact with the internet, that 45 reviews stands out. It tends to be the first, and what most consumers do when they see these agents on the listing is they click through and go to their profile, which is why the profile is super important. Why you want it filled out and complete information. But you've got to get the consumer to click on your profile, and having a large number of reviews is a big positive flag. It's just going to draw the consumer's eyes, and it makes sense, right? If I have 3 agents I'm looking at, and one's got 45 reviews and one's got 2 reviews, I'm far more inclined to click through on the profile of the person that has 45 reviews. Now, I don't know necessarily that those 45 reviews are going to be what convinces the consumer to eventually contact that agent, but it's a big part of at least getting them to the profile. And then once they're on your profile, they can see your past sales. They see the about section where hopefully you're not just talking about yourself, but also about what you can do for the consumer. And they see the reviews and they start reading them. And there's no question. I mean, I hear it every day because I talk to premier agents. That's what we call advertising agents, premier agents. I talk to them every day, and I hear consistently stories like somebody called my phone and the conversation goes, I saw your reviews on Zillow and I want to talk to you about helping me find a home or helping me sell my home. That I saw your reviews on Zillow statement comes up a lot. And there's been all kinds of studies that we've done studies. Lots of companies have done studies about, how much do consumers trust reviews? And they trust them a lot. I think consumers are getting more and more savvy when it comes to looking at reviews. They understand that, people tend to say things maybe on reviews that they wouldn't say face to face because they're kind of hiding behind the keyboard. They have that anonymity of hiding behind a keyboard. But when you've got a whole bunch of consumers that are going, wow, Marguerite's wonderful. She always replied to she always answered her phone. She was knowledgeable. She helped me understand that there's a dairy farm 2 miles down the road from the house I love. And consumers put a lot of validity in that. We also give agents the opportunity to respond to reviews. which I think is super important, and
Yes.
not very many agents take advantage of it. And people tend to lock in. They go, well, if I get a bad review, I'll respond to it. I think agents should respond to every review. It's just another opportunity, for one, to get more information on your profile. And two, it just shows the people, the consumers that are reading your reviews, what kind of person you are. And an example might be you get a review that says, Marguerite was amazing. She always answered her phone. She was easy to get in touch with. She was fun to work with. And that's kind of the review. You could then come in as a response and say, it was wonderful working with you. We always love working with first-time home buyers. Now you've just gotten a little keyword, first-time home buyers, into your Zillow profile. And you can drill that all the way down. You mentioned that you live near a golf course. You can say things like, finding those golf course homes is always kind of tricky. There's just replying to review is a way to get more of what you do into your profile.
Well, that was a great tip, because I don't know that I even knew that one. So there you go, smarty pants. And here's the other thing that I'm sure that hopefully agents know this by now, but even if you don't advertise with you guys, you can still go in and have your profile set up. And can't even tell you how many agents don't have their profile set up. So rule number one, agents, go in and clean up your profile and put your information in there, do your sales, like especially newer agents. Mm-hmm. They were like, well, but I don't really have very many sales. Well, every one that you have adds to it. So you're not going to be able to compete with me right now on there. But the truth, because I have a lot more sales, but the bottom line is you could end up getting more reviews, because actually at the end of the day, when I was saying a minute ago, my profile against somebody else's, that agent was newer than me and had sold less homes, but she had a lot more reviews than me. Yep. So she would actually show up first in the metrics.
Very, very well could. And a lot of people ask me, they go, I don't understand, how could this person have fewer sales but have more reviews? On Zillow Groups sites, you don't have to have a closed transaction to get a review. And I think a lot of people just assume, well, I only want reviews from people that I've closed transactions with. But you can ask for reviews for somebody that you've worked with. And I understand it makes agents nervous. Why would I ask somebody for a review? I drugged this guy around, showed him 100 houses, and he never bought anything. Do I really want this person reviewing me? And you just might, because I've seen some really, really good reviews left by consumers that didn't buy a house. And when you see something like, I worked with Marguerite for 3 months. She showed us a bunch of houses. She knew what we were looking for, but the timing just didn't work out for us. Or I got an unexpected job relocation offer right in the middle of the process. So even though I never bought a home from Marguerite, we had a great experience with her, and I would highly recommend her to anybody else. That's a super powerful review. This is someone that didn't even close a transaction with you. It's talking about how wonderful you are. And consumers will eat that up. That's a good solid review. It's hard.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Hard to ask
things
somebody
I didn't really
that,
think about. Because like I said, for me, for many years we didn't even have Zillow, so for a long time that was never really a part of my business. But I think that there is a space for it, and I think, like I said, the kind of whole love-hate thing is you got to really try to look at both sides and figure out how you can make something work for you.
Sure.
So tell me about some of the real success stories you see with Zillow. Got a couple of examples?
Sure. I was just looking at somebody. They were talking about, we have a Facebook group that is a kind of a private closed group for some of our bigger advertisers so that they can share, collaborate, and things like that. In that Facebook group, it's kind of corny, but we have we call it Wednesday, Winsday. So on Wednesdays, we like to just talk about wins that some of the agents have had. And I see things like, there was one just the other day, I don't know if it was this Wednesday or last week, doesn't really matter, where someone was talking about they had gotten a contact on the agent was in Florida, I believe, the Miami area. Real estate's expensive, but they were talking about these transactions that they had going on because of Zillow contacts. People, looking at $1 and $2 million condos on Miami Beach that they found the agent through Zillow. We have some advertisers that have basically built their team or brokerage around the Zillow contacts that they get. I talk to agents every day that are successful with it, and that's what I really wish I could get out to the community, particularly to the naysayers. There's a lot of people out there who'll say Zillow leads stink, right? There's no ROI. I was talking to a guy last week that told me, he goes, Jay, I make $8 for every dollar I spend on Zillow. Okay, that's a pretty darn good return on investment. So he's like, I want to buy more because if I make $8 for every dollar I spend, I'm going to spend more dollars because the more I spend, the more I make. I see ROI like that all the time, 4, 5, 6, 10x ROI. And I think a lot of times agents, I hate to say they're short-sighted, but it's sometimes they don't get that big long-term picture. You can spend a lot of money on Zillow buying impressions, but if that money turns into commission checks, then that's a good investment.
So let me ask you this question then, because the ones that are doing it, that are getting $8, $10 return on their investment, they obviously must have a process in place to make sure that they are converting these, that they are doing drip campaigns. Like the ones that you see that are most successful with that, what are they doing that others are not doing? Where are other people dropping the ball that these guys aren't?
Yeah, that's a great question. Step number one and critical step is responding fast. Okay. At Zillow, we do a lot of consumer surveys and focus groups. We'll actually bring consumers into rooms and have these discussions with them. How do you use the site? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And so we've done a lot of studies just on consumer behavior on the internet. And, like it or not, it is the way it is. When somebody on the internet clicks a button that says contact an agent, they expect some kind of reply almost instantly. And it's just kind of the nature of the internet. It's just like if you go to Amazon to buy something, when you click that buy button, you want to buy it, right? I mean, right. The internet kind of demands or has urgencies are great. Yeah. People just respond fast. And what I hear a lot of times when I say that is people say, well, you know what? I got a contact from Zillow and it said, I'm interested in 123 Main Street. And I'm driving in my car, going to an appointment. I don't know anything about 123 Main Street. So I don't have time to pull up the MLS and research it. So how can I respond fast if I don't know anything about the house? Well, a perfect response for that might be, you know what? I'm in my car, I'm driving, I'm going to an appointment. I'll get back to you, within an hour or two with some answers to your questions. You don't necessarily have to answer the question that somebody has to respond. Just let them know that there's a human being on the other side of the internet and that you'll help them. Our app, we have a consumer app, lots of consumer apps, but we also have our Premier Agent app, which is an app designed for agents. And in it, again, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for agents to convert more contacts. Again, it goes back to that capitalistic, selfish thing. The more contacts you convert, the more likely you are to write bigger checks. So in the app, we have some canned responses that are just super short. So you'll get a contact, and literally with the click of a button, you can say, on an appointment, we'll call you right back, or we'll call you back in an hour. You can also build your own responses. So you can get that initial response out super fast. And that tends to stop that. The consumer goes, hey, I finally found a human being on the other end of this. And so it stops their wandering behavior. They're going to keep clicking contact an agent button until somebody contacts them. So being the first one to contact them, even if you don't have all the answers right away, is super, super important. to success. The other thing is follow-up. You mentioned drip campaigns.
Fortune is in the follow-up, right?
Yep. That is super important too. We have some drip email systems or drip emails that are available, campaigns. There's lots of ways to follow up, but I think a lot of agents will drop the ball there. I worked internet leads myself as an agent long before I started at Zillow, and you just need to understand the nature of the internet consumer. They want a fast response, and understand too that a lot of internet shoppers, home shoppers, are fairly high up in the sales funnel. They may just be looking at houses now, not really thinking about buying for months, maybe even years. I had on my personal blog, or not my personal blog, my real estate blog, my personal record is 3.5 years later. I get a phone call. I got a phone call one day. I'll never forget it. And this phone call comes across, and it's like, "Hey, Jay, it's Mike. How you doing?" I'm like, "Mike? Who the heck is Mike?" I'm looking at my wife going, some guy named Mike. And he's like, "I've been on your website for 3 years. I've been looking at homes 3 years. I've been looking at homes, and now we're ready to go out, and now we're serious, and we're ready to buy something. Are you available this weekend to show us some homes?" I go back, and I look through my history, and I can see this guy Mike, sure enough, couple times a week, maybe every other week, but for the last 3 years, at least every few weeks, he's come and he's spent 30, 45 minutes on the website. I had a drip campaign set up that apparently he believed I was personally writing him these emails every time, which is fine. But
they're good emails if they come across that way.
Yes, exactly. Point being, though, that some of these folks are a long way off in the buying process. And that's hard for an agent. They're like, okay, I'm going to have to drip on this guy and try to maintain communication for the next 3 years. Is it worth it? Well, my guess is 3 years from now, you're probably going to need a commission check.
Yeah.
So you fill up that pipeline, and then it doesn't really matter.
Well, it's the iceberg thought process, right?
Yep.
So you see that a lot in marketing where, just the tip of the iceberg is showing. And that's the people that have popped up and said, "I'm ready to buy or sell right now."
Yeah.
But 99% of your buyers, well, probably 90% of your buyers are below the water level.
Yep.
And they're just kind of snooping around. They're looking at Zillow to see what their house is worth. They're, checking neighborhoods out to see what prices are. And
Sure.
Honestly, they're taking a huge chunk of the work off of our plate, if you want to look at it that way. I mean,
They really are.
like I said, back in the old days, we had to oops, lost my headphone. We had to start by putting them in the car and driving them around for, days on end. And,
Yep. Flipping through a 3-ring binder of listings.
Exactly. So, in some ways it's taken it off the plate. But that follow-up, that's really where the money is.
It really
is. But the conversion is somewhat of a challenge. I do know that because, it seems that many people are doing their search late at night,
Yep.
So you get these leads that might come through at 11, 12 o'clock at night. What do people do with those? Do they just shoot an email? Do they call? How do they handle those, some of your big guys?
Most of the big successful ones have autoresponders set up. And, I've heard all the arguments, autoresponders aren't personal, which is true, but you know what? I started off my auto response emails by saying, this is an auto response email, I'm not trying to hide the fact that it's an auto response. So I just start off, this is an auto response. I will get back to you in the morning, which again, you've made at least some kind of contact with that person. They clicked the button that said contact an agent. So even if they get an auto response, that's a huge step ahead. They've probably already clicked that contact an agent button 3 or 4 other times and gotten nothing. So if you can be the one, I don't know the number, but it's a huge percentage of consumers that will basically go with the first agent that contacts them.
Oh, I've heard those numbers. They're they're like 70, 80%.
Yeah, it's gigantic.
Here's a funny story. I actually got called, again, I've been in real estate a long time. I got called not too long ago, and they called to say they were interviewing me against a few other agents. And that never happens to me. I never have that happen. And so I was like, oh, well, now this is kind of fun. I'm a competitive type person, so game on, right?
Yep, exactly.
And I went out there and I said, well, I'm so fascinated that you're interviewing a few. Like, how many are you interviewing, you know? And she goes, well, we decided we'd interview 5. I'm like, really? 5 people you interviewed? I ended up winning, the appointment. But it was so funny because I would say that really the majority of my clients don't. They just talk to me.
Yeah.
They're not interviewing against other people. Mostly, I think, because they're too lazy for the most part. Like, I don't want to interview 5 different people to figure out who I'm going to pick. If I connect with the first one, I'm like, all right, that's good.
Exactly. And I'm fully convinced, and I always have been, that, and this may sound like it's oversimplifying things, but I think fundamentally people pick a real estate agent to work with because they like them. They've made some kind of connection with them. And again, it goes back to this being such a personal experience. So, if I'm lined up with interviewing against 3 other agents, it's still going to be, you need to demonstrate your knowledge, obviously, but likability is huge. And people want to work with an agent that they like. So if you can be likable, that's half the battle.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
The very successful converters at Zillow, though, they respond fast. They have follow-up process. Some of them have extremely detailed processes. Like I will make 2 phone calls on the first day of contact. If I don't get any contact, then I send an email on day 3, and I call again on day 4. And then day 5, I do this and that. So there's some people that have very detailed processes, but most aren't quite that anal about it.
Right.
But they almost without fail, agents that are successful at converting leads in general. And I don't care if they come from Zillow or your own website, a brokerage website, realtor.com. Internet leads kind of all tend to have the same type of behavior, but having some sort of process is super critical to success. We have data that shows a striking number of agents, and keep in mind these are agents that pay us to get contacts, that they still don't answer the phone, or they don't pick up the phone, or they don't reach out. I hear people all the time say things like, "Well, I talked to them, and they're a good 6 months away from buying, so I'll call."
That's
I'll
gold.
try. Yeah, and but then I'll hear. I guess I'll reach out to them again in another 5 months and see if they're still interested. No, don't.
They'll already buy by then.
Yep, and with
That's
somebody
so
else. So it's I can't fathom why somebody that pays for leads doesn't respond to the lead. But you hear that a lot. You hear internet leads suck. It is a numbers game. You're never going to convert 100% of internet leads.
Well, you're not going to convert 100% of any leads, truthfully.
You're not.
I mean, I run the stats all the time, and I always tell people, I go, advertising leads typically convert 100 to 1, whatever the advertising format is, doesn't matter. Business to business is 10 to 1, and referral and past client is 3 to 1.
Yeah.
And that's not even 100%, right?
Nothing is. So yes, there's a bit of a numbers game to it, which can be frustrating. And when you hear things like 3% conversion rate, you think, wow, that's an awful lot of work. But it is work. It's
work, right?
It's a job.
If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Exactly. And there is no magic. There's no magic pill. The bottom line is it's work. At the top, my brokerage, we had 32 agents was our highest brokerage count. And I could, to this day, if I took a list of those agents and listed them by how hard they work, that will match up almost 100% with how much money they make.
Absolutely.
The ones that worked harder made more money.
Absolutely.
It's not rocket science, but that's life. That's how it works. So you've got to work these leads. Believe me, I wish we had a product where someone could click a button and a commission check would pop out the other end.
I want that easy button. Please send it to me first. I'll pay for it.
Unfortunately, it just doesn't exist. It is work. You got to understand that you're never going to land them all, but try to learn something from every one and improve. That's all you can do.
Well, as we wrap up today, I wanted to ask one other question. Is that what is your thoughts about, I know there was some controversy recently about NAR not letting you guys have a booth or something at NAR.
Yep.
What was that all about? What are your thoughts on that?
That was basically, we were going to have a booth at the big NAR annual conference, which is in Orlando this year.
November, yeah.
At the time, we were involved in a lawsuit, right? It's a long, drawn-out story, and we don't tend to talk about lawsuits, but it's not a secret. Move, which runs Realtor.com, sued us, claiming that we poached a couple of employees from them and took trade secrets and all this nonsense. But NAR was a party in that lawsuit. They were co-plaintiffs, I guess it is. So I'm making some assumptions here, but I think somebody at NAR said, you know what? We're involved in the middle of this lawsuit with Zillow Groups, so it doesn't make sense to them to have us on their trade floor. That lawsuit has since been settled. It was settled out of court before it went to trial. I don't know if NAR will revisit that decision, okay, because the reason they stated for not letting us exhibit was because of the lawsuit. The lawsuit's over. Will we be allowed back in? I don't know. I would hope so. We love to go to the NAR show.
You guys put on good parties.
We put on good parties. We have a nice booth. Yes, we make some money there. To be honest, and this is nothing against NAR, it's expensive to display at a trade show. It's not cheap. So that's money that NAR's not making from us. We probably, I don't work in sales, but I'm going to guess that we probably roughly break even. You know, it's not a big giant event where we walk away with tons and tons of sales. We do get them, obviously, but probably just enough to cover the cost. I think we need to be there. We are, whether people love us or hate us, it's indisputable. We have the highest trafficked real estate website in the country. In Zillow, and depending on whose numbers you listen to, either the second or third highest trafficked website in Trulia. Right. So to not have the biggest internet presence for real estate at a trade show
at their biggest event of the year
doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. So I suspect that at some point NAR will come back and go, you know what, the lawsuit mess is over, it's done with. You guys are welcome to come back and exhibit.
Absolutely.
If they did that, I'm sure we would be there. We don't hold a grudge against them. We're going to exhibit if they let us. If they don't, then they don't.
There's lots of other events throughout the country.
There's lots of other events. We have our own events frequently, which are nice. They're not really sales events. They're really more informational, where we try to both help existing advertisers understand how to use our systems better, and non-advertisers, just to give them an overview of what Zillow's like. So there's lots of events. I mean, clearly NAR Annual is one of the big ones. Would we like to be there? Sure. Will we be there? I think so. But I have nothing official to base that on. We may already be running into timing issues. It's possible that, NAR said, sorry, Zillow Group, not this year. They may have filled all their expo floor space. There may not be room for us now. I don't know. But I assume within the next, annual's in November, so sometime within the next month or so, I'm sure we'll at least know whether or not we're going to be exhibiting at NAR.
Awesome. Well, Jay, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being a guest on my show today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the time and the attention that you are doing in the groups, because, there's some huge real estate groups out there. We know Lab Coats, Owls, and a number of others. Yep. And the great thing is it helps everyone understand more about, because just like I said, I've had a love-hate relationship with you guys.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have.
Everybody does. And I think that I've used it to really improve the way I do business and improve the systems and processes that I run on my team. But there's always a place for getting new business. So thank you.
And, even if you never advertise with Zillow, like you said, I'm not trying to sell anything. Have a profile. All right. It's free. Yes. Why, regardless of how you feel about Zillow, it doesn't make sense to me to not have a presence, again, on the highest traffic sites on the internet. And since we acquired Trulia, we make it even a little bit easier. You can build a profile on Zillow. It'll get automatically ported over to Trulia so that you don't have to worry about double entry and keeping up two separate profiles. They basically feed off of each other. Put those past sales in there because consumers love that. It's a really good visual way for consumers to see how busy you are. And yes, I talk to Zillow advertising agents every day, but I also talk to agents frequently that don't advertise with us, but still get business from us.
Yeah.
And that's free business. Right?
Yeah, that's pretty. I've had a few of those calls, not even in the areas that I ever advertised in.
Yep.
And I'm always baffled by that. I'm like, how did they get my information when I'm not even paying for advertising? So it's pretty cool.
That profile's key, and I think it is pretty cool, and you can get a lot of mileage out of it. So
well, thanks again. I appreciate your time. I look forward to meeting you in person here one of these days. Are you going to be at Inman in San Fran?
I am.
Oh, well, I'll meet you there. I'll look forward to connecting with you there.
We should have coffee or a drink or dinner or something.
Absolutely, I would love to.
That'd be great. And we should do this again. I could talk about this stuff forever. So
anytime you want to come back on the show, you just holler. We'll have you again.
Maybe next time we have a little product announcement or something like that, we can come on and talk about that. Because we're always rolling out new stuff. So
that would be awesome. Thanks again. All right, everybody, go out and make it a great.
Thank you for joining us today on Real Estate Real World, where we talk with masters and leaders in real estate and beyond on how we can raise the bar in our industry. Please subscribe over on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to give us a review. Your reviews encourage us and help others find our podcast. For show notes and hot topics on what's going on right now in our real estate industry, hop on over to www.realestaterealworld.com and add your name to our email. Thanks again for listening. And go out there. Be a part of the elite masterclass in raising the bar on the real estate industry.